The flash of headlights through the window momentarily illuminated Penelope Ellis's frustrated expression as she sidestepped another drunken corporate executive attempting to engage her in conversation. The charity gala at the Worthington Hotel had quickly devolved from a sophisticated fundraising event into what felt like a glorified frat party for the city's elite. Penelope tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, scanning the crowded ballroom for the nearest exit. After 4 hours of mindless small talk, fake laughter, and dodging wandering hands, she was beyond ready to escape. "Just one more drink, sweetheart," slurred Harold, the middle-aged marketing director from her publishing company, swaying slightly as he approached her for the third time that evening. "No thank you, Harold." "I was actually just about to head out," Penelope replied firmly, clutching her small purse tighter. "The night's just getting started," Harold protested, but Penelope was already making her way toward the hallway that led to the side entrance of the hotel. She rounded the corner just in time to see a tall figure in a perfectly tailored black suit attempting to slip unnoticed through the service exit. Something about his furtive movements caught her attention. He was clearly another guest trying to escape the insufferable party. In the dim light, she could make out broad shoulders and dark hair. "Leaving so soon?" Penelope called out impulsively, instantly regretting drawing attention to herself when she was trying to make her own getaway. The man froze, then turned slowly. His face came into view, and Penelope felt her breath catch slightly. He was undeniably handsome, with strong features, piercing blue eyes, and a 5 o'clock shadow that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from his polished appearance. "Caught red-handed," he replied with a small, conspiratorial smile. "I was hoping to make a clean getaway." "That makes 2 of us," Penelope admitted, taking a step closer. "I don't think I can stomach another minute of Harold from marketing telling me about his golf handicap." The stranger chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to fill the empty hallway. "I was cornered by Vivian from the board for 20 minutes. She showed me 63 photos of her cats." 63? Penelope raised an eyebrow, finding herself smiling despite her exhaustion. "I counted," he confirmed with mock seriousness. "The worst part is that I'm pretty sure several were duplicates." A burst of raucous laughter from the ballroom made them both glance nervously over their shoulders. "Well, don't let me keep you from your escape," Penelope said, gesturing toward the exit. The man hesitated, studying her for a moment. "Actually, I was thinking about grabbing some real food. The canapés in there wouldn't satisfy a mouse." He paused, then added, "I'm Connor, by the way." "Connor Yates, Penelope Ellis," she replied, extending her hand, which he shook firmly. "There's a great diner a few blocks from here," Connor suggested. "Best pancakes in the city, and they serve them all night. Unless you have other plans," Penelope knew she should politely decline. She'd only just met this man, and while he seemed nice enough, she had a strict policy against impromptu late-night outings with strangers. But something about his genuine smile and the shared conspiracy of their mutual escape made her reconsider. "Pancakes sound perfect, actually," she found herself saying. "Lead the way." The crisp night air was a welcome relief after the stuffy ballroom. As they walked, Penelope was conscious of the contrast between them, she in her emerald evening gown and he in his immaculately tailored suit. "So what brought you to that disaster of a party?" Connor asked, slowing his pace to match hers as she navigated the sidewalk in her heels. "Work obligation. I'm an editor at Horizon Publishing and our company sponsored a table," she explained. "You?" Connor seemed to consider his answer carefully. "Similar situation. Supporting a good cause gone wrong." "The Children's Hospital Foundation deserves better than that circus," Penelope agreed. "I doubt half those people even knew which charity they were supposedly supporting." They reached the diner, a classic establishment with neon signs and chrome finishes that gleamed under the streetlights. Inside, red vinyl booths and the smell of coffee created an atmosphere entirely opposite to the pretentious gala they'd escaped from. A waitress with a name tag reading Doris approached them, not batting an eye at their formal attire. "Sit anywhere you like, dears." They chose a booth by the window, and Penelope slipped off her painful heels with a sigh of relief under the table. "So, Penelope Ellis of Horizon Publishing," Connor said once they'd ordered coffee and pancakes. "Tell me more about yourself." "Not much to tell," she replied, wrapping her hands around the warm mug that Doris had promptly delivered. "I've been with Horizon for 5 years, working my way up from assistant to senior editor. I specialize in fiction, mostly literary and some commercial. I love my job most days, most days." "Well, not days that involve schmoozing with potential donors who can't remember my name but remember exactly where my eyes aren't located," she said dryly. Connor winced. "I'm sorry, those events can bring out the worst in people." "What about you? What do you do, Connor Yates?" Penelope asked, curious about this man who seemed so comfortable in his expensive suit yet equally at ease in a 24-hour diner. Again, there was that slight hesitation. "I'm in investment management," he said finally, "mostly working with private clients." "Is that as boring as it sounds?" Penelope teased, surprised at her own boldness. Connor laughed, a genuine sound that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Sometimes, but it can also be fascinating. I essentially help people make their money work for them, which means understanding their dreams, fears, priorities." "So you're part financial advisor, part therapist?" "That's actually a perfect description. I might put that on my business cards," he said, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Their pancakes arrived, towering stacks drowning in syrup and butter. The conversation flowed easily as they ate, discovering shared interests in classic literature, obscure documentaries, and a mutual hatred for cilantro. "It tastes like soap," they exclaimed in unison, then laughed at the coincidence. "So why editing?" Connor asked, pouring more syrup onto his rapidly disappearing pancakes. "What drew you to it?" Penelope considered the question, appreciating that he hadn't asked the usual "do you want to write a book yourself someday?" that she typically received. "I've always loved stories," she began, "but I never had the drive to create them from scratch. What I do have is a knack for seeing what makes a story work or what's preventing it from working. There's something magical about helping an author shape their vision, watching a manuscript transform from good to incredible." Connor nodded thoughtfully. "You're like a story architect, reinforcing the foundation and improving the structure without changing the essential design." "Exactly," Penelope said, surprised and pleased by his understanding. "What about you? Have you always been interested in finance?" "Not always," Connor admitted. "I studied business because it seemed practical, but I fell in love with the human element of financial planning. Money is deeply personal, and helping people navigate those waters can be genuinely rewarding." As they talked, Penelope found herself increasingly drawn to Connor. There was a depth to him that contrasted sharply with the shallow conversations she'd endured earlier that evening. His questions were thoughtful, his listening genuine. By the time they'd finished their pancakes and were on their third cup of coffee, Penelope realized it was nearly 2 a.m. "I should probably get going," she said reluctantly, reaching for her purse. "Let me take care of this," Connor said, already pulling out his wallet. "We can split it," Penelope insisted. "Please, I invited you, and after you saved me from another hour of cat photos, it's the least I can do." Penelope relented with a smile. "All right, but I'm getting it next time." The words hung between them, the assumption of a next time, unplanned but somehow anticipated. Connor smiled. "I'd like that." Outside the diner, the night had grown cooler. Connor immediately shrugged off his suit jacket and placed it around Penelope's shoulders before she could protest. "Such a gentleman," she teased, but gratefully pulled the jacket tighter around her. It smelled faintly of an expensive cologne, subtle and pleasant. "Can I call you a car?" Connor offered, pulling out his phone. "Actually, I'm just a few blocks away," Penelope said. "I live in the Crawford building on Maple Street." "I'll walk you," Connor said immediately, in a tone that suggested it wasn't really a question. As they strolled through the quiet streets, their conversation continued seamlessly. Penelope found herself sharing stories about her childhood in Oregon, her move to the city for college, and her struggle to establish herself in publishing. Connor spoke of growing up with 4 sisters, his passion for rock climbing, and his recent efforts to learn French cooking. "I've mastered exactly one dish," he admitted. "A pretty decent coq au vin. Everything else ends up either undercooked or charred beyond recognition." "Still better than me," Penelope laughed. "My specialty is creative applications of takeout leftovers." All too soon, they reached the Crawford building, a stately pre-war apartment complex with a doorman who tipped his hat as they approached. "Good evening, Miss Ellis," he greeted, then nodded respectfully at Connor. "This is me," Penelope said, suddenly feeling shy. She slipped off Connor's jacket and handed it back to him. "Thank you for the pancakes and the conversation. Both were exactly what I needed tonight." "The pleasure was all mine," Connor replied, taking the jacket but making no move to leave. "Penelope, I'd really like to see you again." The directness of his statement sent a small thrill through her. "I'd like that too." Connor smiled, then pulled out his phone. "May I have your number?" They exchanged contact information, and Penelope found herself both nervous and excited about the prospect of seeing him again. "Good night, Connor," she said finally, taking a step toward the building entrance. "Good night, Penelope," he replied, waiting until she was safely inside before turning to leave. As Penelope rode the elevator to her sixth-floor apartment, she couldn't help but smile. What had started as an escape from a terrible party had turned into one of the most enjoyable evenings she'd had in months. The following morning, Penelope woke to a text message from Connor. "Thank you for making a bad party end with great pancakes. Free for dinner Friday. I promise no fundraisers involved." She smiled, typing back an affirmative response before getting ready for work with a lightness in her step that had been absent for some time. The week passed in a blur of manuscript deadlines and meetings, but Penelope found her thoughts drifting frequently to Connor. They exchanged occasional texts, nothing overly flirtatious, just small observations about their days that made her smile. Friday evening arrived, and Penelope found herself spending more time than usual deciding what to wear. She finally settled on a burgundy wrap dress that was both comfortable and flattering. Connor had suggested a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, assuring her it was casual but excellent. When she arrived, he was already waiting outside, looking handsome in dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt. His face lit up when he spotted her approaching. "You look beautiful," he said by way of greeting, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "Thank you," Penelope replied, feeling a flutter in her stomach at the brief contact. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The restaurant was exactly as he described, intimate and unpretentious, with white tablecloths, candles, and the heavenly smell of garlic and fresh bread. They were seated at a corner table that afforded them some privacy, and Connor ordered a bottle of wine after consulting with Penelope about her preferences. "So how was your week?" he asked once the wine had been poured. "Chaotic," Penelope admitted. "One of our major authors missed a deadline, another is threatening to move to a different publishing house, and my assistant quit to join a traveling circus." "A circus, really?" Connor looked surprised. "No," Penelope laughed. "But that would be more interesting than the truth, which is that she got a better offer from our competitor." "And here I thought publishing was all cozy reading nooks and thoughtful discussions about literature," Connor teased. "That's about 10% of the job. The rest is deadlines, contracts, and managing fragile egos," Penelope said. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything. How about you? Save any financial futures this week?" Something flickered across Connor's face. "It was a challenging week, actually. I had to make some difficult decisions." "Anything you want to talk about?" Penelope asked, noticing his change in demeanor. Connor seemed to consider this, then shook his head slightly. "Not tonight. Tonight I'd rather focus on getting to know you better." Penelope nodded, respecting his boundary while noting his reluctance to discuss his work in detail. Throughout dinner, they shared delicious pasta and more stories from their lives. Connor told her about his recent trip to New Zealand for work, describing the stunning landscapes with such vivid detail that Penelope could almost see them. "I've always wanted to travel more," she confessed. "But between student loans and New York rent, exotic vacations haven't been in the budget." Again, that slight look of discomfort crossed Connor's face before he smoothly changed the subject. "Tell me about your family. Are they all back in Oregon?" Penelope described her father a high school science teacher, her mother a nurse, and her younger brother who was studying engineering. Connor spoke fondly of his sisters, now scattered across the country, and his parents who had retired to Florida. "Typical," Penelope joked. The Florida retirement. Complete with a condo on a golf course and enough floral-patterned furniture to outfit a small hotel, Connor agreed with a grin. After dinner, neither of them seemed ready for the evening to end. Connor suggested a walk along the High Line, and despite the slight chill in the air, Penelope eagerly agreed. As they strolled along the elevated park, Connor tentatively took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, and Penelope felt a pleasant shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. "I have a confession," Connor said as they paused to look out over the city lights. "I've been thinking about you all week." Penelope turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. "That's funny, because I've been thinking about you too." Connor's smile was warm as he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "May I kiss you, Penelope?" The formal request was so endearing that Penelope couldn't help but smile as she nodded. Connor leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, Penelope felt slightly breathless. "I've been wanting to do that since the diner," Connor admitted, his hand still cradling her face. "What took you so long?" Penelope teased, earning a laugh from Connor before he kissed her again. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of dating. Connor took Penelope to art galleries, jazz clubs, and quiet cafes. They spent a rainy Sunday at the Museum of Natural History, making up ridiculous stories about the diorama animals. They cooked dinner together at Penelope's apartment, or rather, Penelope watched in amusement as Connor attempted to recreate his famous coq au vin, which turned out surprisingly well despite his earlier warnings. With each date, Penelope found herself falling harder for Connor. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and made her laugh in a way no one else had. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling her. It was the small things, the way he sometimes deflected questions about his work, his occasional vague references to meetings or clients without specifics, how he always paid for their dates despite her offers to split the bill, and the fact that she had never been to his apartment. "Where do you live anyway?" Penelope asked one evening as they shared dessert at a small French bistro. "I just realized I don't even know." "Tribeca," Connor replied, then quickly asked her about a manuscript she'd been editing, effectively changing the subject. The pattern continued, and while Penelope was enjoying their relationship too much to press the issue, her curiosity was definitely piqued. Then came the invitation. One of Horizon Publishing's biggest authors, Jackson Reed, was having a launch party for his latest novel, and Penelope was expected to attend with a +1 if she wished. "It's this Saturday," she told Connor over the phone. "Completely understand if you can't make it, but I thought I'd ask." "I'd love to come," Connor replied without hesitation. "I'll pick you up at 7. The night of the party, Penelope felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This would be their first public event together, and many of her colleagues would be there. Connor arrived exactly at 7, looking devastatingly handsome in another perfectly tailored suit. "You look incredible," he said, his eyes appreciatively taking in her midnight blue cocktail dress. "So do you," she replied, accepting his kiss before they headed downstairs to the waiting car, a sleek black luxury vehicle with a driver. "You hired a car service?" Penelope asked, surprised. "It seemed easier than trying to find parking," Connor said casually, as the driver opened the door for them. The launch party was being held at an upscale bookstore that had been transformed for the evening with soft lighting, flowers, and champagne. As they entered, Penelope immediately spotted her boss, Catherine, waving her over. "Catherine, this is Connor Yates," Penelope introduced. "Connor, this is my boss, Catherine Winters." Catherine's eyes widened slightly as she shook Connor's hand. "Connor Yates of Yates Capital Partners." Penelope looked between them in confusion. Guilty as charged, Connor admitted with a slightly uncomfortable smile. Catherine turned to Penelope with raised eyebrows. You didn't mention you were dating one of the city's most successful investment managers. Penelope began, but was interrupted by Jackson Reed himself approaching to greet them. Connor, I didn't expect to see you here, Jackson exclaimed, clapping Connor on the shoulder. How's that investment in the sustainable energy project working out? Very well, actually, Connor replied, then gestured to Penelope. I'm here with Penelope tonight. Jackson looked surprised. You're with Penelope, my editor, small world. He turned to Penelope. Connor's firm manages my portfolio. Best decision I ever made, financially speaking. Penelope smiled politely, but her mind was racing. Throughout the evening, several other guests approached Connor, all seemingly familiar with him or his reputation. She noticed how they deferred to him, how the conversation often turned to financial matters or business connections. During a moment alone by the drinks table, Penelope turned to Connor. Yates Capital Partners, Connor sighed, running a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you. Tell me what, exactly? Penelope asked, keeping her voice low. That you're not just in investment management, but apparently running your own firm, that you're some kind of financial hotshot. I didn't want it to change things between us, Connor explained. In my experience, once people know about the money, they treat me differently. And how much money are we talking about? Penelope asked, then immediately shook her head. No, forget I asked that. It's none of my business. It is your business if we're going to have a relationship built on honesty, Connor said seriously. Yates Capital Partners is a private investment firm I founded 8 years ago. We manage over $2 billion in assets, and yes, I'm comfortable, Penelope repeated flatly. As in Millionaire comfortable, yes, Connor admitted. I'm sorry I wasn't more forthcoming. I just wanted you to get to know me as a person, not as a bank account. Penelope took a sip of her champagne, processing this information. So that night at the gala when we met, I was there because my firm had donated to the Children's Hospital Foundation, Connor explained. But those events are always the same people pitching investment ideas or trying to get donations for their own causes. I snuck out because I wanted a genuine connection, not another networking opportunity. And then you ran into me, Penelope said, the pieces falling into place. Best escape plan gone wrong ever, Connor said with a small smile, his eyes hopeful as he gauged her reaction. Penelope was quiet for a moment, then asked, Is Connor Yates even your real name? Yes, he said immediately. Everything I've told you about myself is true. My family, my interests, my feelings for you, especially those. The only thing I downplayed was my financial situation. Penelope nodded slowly. I need some time to think about this. Of course, Connor said, though she could see the worry in his eyes. Should I take you home? No, I should stay until the end. It's part of my job, Penelope said, but you don't have to stay if you'd rather not. I'll stay, Connor said firmly. We came together, we'll leave together. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur for Penelope. She went through the motions of networking and congratulating Jackson, but her mind kept returning to Connor's revelation. By the time they left, well past midnight, an awkward tension had settled between them. In the car ride back to her apartment, Connor finally broke the silence. I understand if you're upset with me. I'm not upset, Penelope said, choosing her words carefully. I'm just processing. It's a lot to take in. Does it change how you feel about me? Connor asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. Penelope turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, he looked just like the man she'd been falling for over the past month. Kind eyes, strong jawline, that slight crease between his eyebrows when he was concerned. No, she said honestly. It doesn't change how I feel about you. But it does make me wonder what else I might not know. Ask me anything, Connor offered. I promise to be completely honest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Connor sighed. I've had relationships in the past where the money became the focus. Women who were more interested in what I could provide than who I was. And then there were those who felt intimidated, who thought they didn't belong in my world. I didn't want either of those things to happen with you. Penelope could understand that, even if she didn't fully agree with his approach. I would have appreciated the honesty. You're right, Connor acknowledged. I should have trusted you more. When they reached her apartment building, Connor walked her to the door as always. The doorman greeted them with a nod. Can we talk more tomorrow? Connor asked. Maybe over lunch. Penelope hesitated, then nodded. Lunch would be good. I'll pick you up at noon. When Penelope agreed, Connor leaned in to kiss her cheek. Good night, Penelope. Good night, Connor. Inside her apartment, Penelope kicked off her heels and sat on her couch, mind still racing. She pulled out her phone and did what any modern woman would do. She Googled Connor Yates. The search results confirmed everything he had told her and more. Articles in financial magazines described him as a visionary investor and philanthropic force. His firm specialized in socially responsible investments and had an impressive track record. There were photos of him at charity events, business conferences, even accepting an award for entrepreneurial excellence. One article mentioned that he had started the firm with money he'd made developing a financial app in his early 20s, which he'd sold for a substantial sum. Another detailed his foundation's work funding educational initiatives in underserved communities. Penelope set down her phone, feeling conflicted. On one hand, Connor had not been completely forthright with her. On the other hand, everything she was learning about him only reinforced the qualities she had already come to admire: his intelligence, his thoughtfulness, his desire to make a positive impact. The next morning, Penelope woke to a text from Connor. Still on for lunch. I was thinking we could go to the park if the weather holds. She replied with a simple yes, then spent the morning alternating between cleaning her apartment and overthinking the situation. At noon precisely, her doorman called up to announce Connor's arrival. When she went downstairs, she found him waiting in casual clothes, jeans, and a simple button-down shirt, looking more like the Connor she'd come to know than the wealthy businessman she'd glimpsed the night before. Hi, he said, his expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. Hi, she replied. Park lunch sounds good. They walked to a nearby deli first, where Connor insisted on ordering them sandwiches and drinks. The sky was clear, and they found a bench in a sunny spot away from the weekend crowds. So, Connor began after they'd settled with their food, I owe you a proper explanation. You do, Penelope agreed. I founded Yates Capital Partners when I was 26, Connor started. Before that, I created a financial planning app during grad school that ended up being acquired by a major bank. That gave me the capital to start my own firm, focusing on investments that generate both financial returns and positive social impact. That's impressive, Penelope acknowledged. The firm grew faster than I expected, Connor continued. We now have offices in 3 cities and about 50 employees, and yes, it's made me wealthy, but that's not what defines me, or at least I don't want it to be. I can understand that, Penelope said. No one wants to be reduced to just one aspect of themselves. Exactly, Connor said, looking relieved at her understanding. When we met at that gala, I was so refreshed by how easy it was to talk to you. You weren't trying to impress me or get anything from me. You were just you. Because I had no idea who you were, Penelope pointed out. Yes, Connor admitted. And then, as we started dating, I kept telling myself I would bring it up, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. I was afraid of losing what we had. Penelope took a bite of her sandwich, considering his words. I get why you might be cautious, Connor, but relationships need trust. How can I trust you if you keep significant parts of your life hidden from me? You're absolutely right, Connor said, meeting her gaze directly. I made a mistake. I should have been honest with you from the beginning, or at least early on. All I can do now is promise that there are no more secrets. What you see is what you get: a guy who happens to have a successful business, but who is also terrible at French cooking and falls asleep during documentaries. That made Penelope smile despite herself. You only fell asleep during that one documentary about fungus. It was so boring, Connor defended himself, a hint of their usual banter returning. It was fascinating, Penelope countered, then grew serious again. Connor, I need to know that going forward you'll be honest with me about everything. I promise, Connor said solemnly, complete honesty from now on. "And I want to see your apartment," Penelope added. "I'm curious now," Connor laughed. "Deal. Though I should warn you, it's not as homey as yours. I'm rarely there except to sleep." "Is it a penthouse with a helicopter pad?" Penelope asked, only half joking. "No helicopter pad," Connor assured her. "But it is a penthouse." Penelope shook her head, smiling despite herself. "Of course it is." They finished their lunch, and the tension between them gradually eased as they fell back into their comfortable rhythm of conversation. When Connor suggested showing her his apartment that afternoon, Penelope agreed. His building was in Tribeca, as he'd mentioned, a sleek glass tower with a uniformed doorman who greeted Connor by name. The private elevator required a key card and whisked them directly to the penthouse level. Penelope wasn't sure what to expect, but when Connor opened the door, she was surprised by the space. It was undeniably luxurious floor-to-ceiling windows offering spectacular views of the city, high ceilings, and expensive furnishings, but it lacked the ostentatious display of wealth she had half anticipated. Instead, it was tasteful and, as Connor had warned, somewhat impersonal. "This is the main living area," Connor said, gesturing to the open concept space. "Kitchen's over there, though as you know, I'm not much of a cook." Penelope walked to the windows, taking in the panoramic view. "This is incredible." "It's the reason I bought the place," Connor admitted, coming to stand beside her. "I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts. The idea that I could live somewhere with a view like this seemed impossible." As Connor showed her the rest of the apartment, Penelope noticed small touches that revealed more about him: books on sustainable business practices, a climbing wall in what should have been a formal dining room, photos of his family on a side table. "It suits you," Penelope said finally. "Different from what I expected, but it suits you." "Is that a good thing?" Connor asked, his expression hopeful. "Yes," Penelope decided. "It is." Connor stepped closer to her. "Penelope, I really am sorry for not being upfront with you. The last thing I wanted to do was jeopardize what we have." "And what exactly do we have, Connor?" Penelope asked softly. Connor took her hands in his. "Something I haven't felt before. With you, I can just be myself, not Connor Yates of Yates Capital Partners. Just Connor who enjoys pancakes at 2 a.m. and gets into heated debates about book endings." Penelope smiled, remembering their lengthy discussion about the conclusion of a novel they'd both read. "I still think the protagonist should have chosen the other guy, and you're still wrong about that," Connor teased, then grew serious again. "Penelope, I'm falling in love with you." The declaration hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Penelope felt her heart race as she realized she felt the same way. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "millionaire or not." Relief and joy spread across Connor's face as he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that left her breathless. In the months that followed, their relationship deepened. Connor made good on his promise of complete honesty, sharing both the challenges and rewards of his work. Penelope introduced him to her parents when they visited New York, nervous about how they would react to Connor's wealth. Her worries proved unfounded. Her father bonded with Connor over their shared love of rock climbing, while her mother appreciated his genuine interest in her nursing career. Penelope's life changed in subtle ways. There were weekend trips to places she'd always wanted to visit, dinners at restaurants where reservations were typically booked months in advance, and a growing familiarity with Connor's world. Yet the core of their relationship remained unchanged: their conversations, their laughter, the way they challenged and supported each other. One year after their meeting at the ill-fated charity gala, Connor suggested they return to the diner where they'd shared pancakes that first night. "For old time's sake," he said when he picked her up. Doris was still working the night shift and remembered them. "The fancy couple," she exclaimed, showing them to the same booth by the window. They ordered the same towering stacks of pancakes and reminisced about that first night. "I can't believe it's been a year," Penelope marveled. "Best year of my life," Connor said, reaching across the table to take her hand. As they finished their meal, Connor seemed unusually nervous, checking his pockets several times and losing the thread of conversation. "Is everything okay?" Penelope finally asked. More than okay, Connor assured her. He took a deep breath, then slid out of his seat and knelt beside the booth. Penelope's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Around them, the few late-night diners fell silent. Penelope Ellis, Connor began, his voice steady despite his evident nerves. 1 year ago, we both tried to escape from the same terrible party and found each other instead. That night changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You've brought joy, honesty, and love into my world, and I can't imagine my future without you in it. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. Will you marry me? Tears sprang to Penelope's eyes as happiness welled up inside her. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes. Connor slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms as the diner erupted in applause. Even Doris was wiping away a tear as she brought them complimentary coffee. I love you, Connor murmured against Penelope's hair. I love you too, she replied, marveling at how a simple escape from a bad party had led to the greatest love she'd ever known. Later that night, as they walked hand in hand through the city streets, Penelope couldn't help but laugh at the journey that had brought them here. What's so funny? Connor asked, squeezing her hand. Just thinking about how we met, Penelope explained. Both of us sneaking out like teenagers from a party we couldn't stand. If I hadn't caught you at that exit, I'm convinced we would have found each other anyway, Connor said with certainty. Some things are meant to be. As they reached the spot where he'd first kissed her on the High Line, Connor pulled her close under the stars. And Penelope, with her head on the shoulder of the man she loved, Millionaire, pancake enthusiast, and fellow escape artist, thought that perhaps he was right after all.